الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب ولكن البر من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر والملائكة والكتاب والنبيين وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة والموفون بعهدهم إذا عاهدوا والصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. رب أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum viewers. Today our topic is that what is real virtue or real piety and what is not. What is real virtue and what is not. Now before we discuss this topic in some detail by the help of the verse which I have just recited, we must in the beginning ponder that why it is necessary to know that what is real virtue. Now here I should recall, and in fact we should always recall and refresh in our mind whenever we are going to understand any verse of Quran or embarking upon to comprehend any Islamic teachings, that this life has been given to us as a test. That this life has been given to us as a test. And if Allah is our examiner, who is going to pass us in this test or fail us, then naturally it must be He who also should tell us that what is real virtue or what are the acts of piety which are necessary to pass this test, because that is this test is all for. Allah has done this repeatedly in Quran and told us many times that what is real piety. The verse which I have recited in front of you, which is also called the verse of virtue, is the verse number 177 of chapter 2. And this is the most comprehensive in this regard, that it not only gives us the details that what is real virtue, but it also tells us that what is not real virtue. Now, I will give you the translation of this whole verse at once. It's a long verse. It has different portions I have just recited. Now, I'll give you the translation in full and then we will discuss it in parts. The translation goes like this, that it is no virtue that you turn your faces towards the east or the west. It is no virtue that you turn your faces towards the east or the west. But the virtue is that one should sincerely believe in Allah and the last day and the angels and the book and the prophets. And out of his love spend of one's choice wealth for relatives and orphans, for the needy and the wayfarer, for beggars and for the ransom of slaves, and establish the salat and pay the zakat. And the virtuous are those who keep their pledges when they make them, and show fortitude in hardships and adversity, and in the struggle between the truth and falsehood. Such are the truthful people, and such are the pious. Now, after giving this full translation and coming back to the start of the translation, it is said, "It is no virtue that you turn your faces towards the east or the west." To understand this part of the verse, where it is told that what is not virtue, and the allusion is done towards turning one's face towards east or west, we have to know the background of this verse. And for the background, we can see that in the same chapter, in the earlier verses, it has been given that why it is said over there that virtue is not looking towards the east or the west. In the verse number 142, I will just give you the translation and not the text to save the time. In the verse number 142, it is said, "Of course, the foolish people will say, what has turned them abruptly away from the Qibla, towards which they formerly used to turn their faces in prayer? Tell them, O Messenger, east and west all belong to Allah. He shows the right way to anyone He wills. Thus have we made you a community of the golden mean, so that you may be witnesses in regard to mankind, and the Messenger may be a witness in regard to you." Now it is so, before I talk in some detail about this translation of the verse number 142, which I have given to you to explain the background of the verse which is under our discussion today, we must remember that whenever any prophet came to warn his people and invite them towards the worship of one and only God and refrain from worshipping many idols and polytheism, they always tried to refute his claim as a messenger. They used all the pejorative talk against him to discredit him as a messenger of God. The same happened with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whenever he came out to rehearse any verse or revelation sent to him, to the non-believers, they always tried to repudiate it and flouted every teaching with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam presented. In case of this verse, it so happened that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions used to turn their faces during their prayers towards the temple of Jerusalem, which was the Qibla or the direction of prayer for the Christians and the Jews. They kept on doing this throughout their stay in Makkah for 13 years, and then even after migration for another 1.5 years. Then the revelation came, and the Qibla for Muslims was changed from the temple of Jerusalem to Kaaba. And it was then that these verses number 142 and 143 were sent, as they were raising objections, as you have just heard, that they were saying that what happened to these peoples, that for so many years they were turning their face towards one direction, and now they are turning their face towards the other direction, because the temple of Jerusalem and Kaaba are exactly in the opposite direction. So how interesting and how beautiful it is that the objection was raised on the earth by the human beings, and the answer is coming from the heavens by revelation. That is why it is said in the Bible that that prophet will come, that Allah will put his words in his mouth. These words, though uttered by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in front of non-believers, but these were the words of Allah actually. And Allah is giving this explanation. Allah is calling these people fools who are objecting to this change of Qibla or direction of prayers. Allah has called them fools for two reasons, as I have just given you the translation. The one reason is this, that they thought that Allah is confined in one direction, and if Muslims change their direction of prayer, turn their faces from one direction to the other, they in fact turned away from Allah. Whereas that's not the case. Allah is omnipresent and omnipotent. He is present everywhere. He is not confined to any one direction. So that is why Allah is saying they don't think, they don't ponder, They just start objecting without knowing anything, and they are foolish. So for the one reason Allah has called them foolish on this objection is this, that they thought that Allah is confined in one direction. The other reason which has been given here is this, that they think that it has been done just like that, for nothing. No, it is rather an indication that now Muslim Ummah, the companions of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and himself, have been appointed on that position of the golden mean, nation of the golden mean. Golden mean is given here as a translation of the words in Arabic, Ummat Wast. But actually, let me tell you very clearly that this word golden mean doesn't convey the full meaning of this word Ummat Wast. The nation of golden means actually should mean that it's a nation which has a middle course, a course of moderation among all the nations of the world. It has the central position in every regard of the word. It has the relationship of the trustworthiness and justice with all the nation around it. And above all, it has been assigned on the position of the spiritual leadership, and now it has to guide all the mankind. That is why it is said here that they should be held witness in the hereafter, that whether they did this or not. Before Muslims, in fact, Jews or the children of Israel were appointed on this position, but they floundered this opportunity and they denied many prophets which came in their line, and in fact they became such daredevils that they even killed their prophets. And finally they become such heinous that Quran says and quotes them that when they crucified in their own right, when they crucified Jesus on the cross, they said that we have killed Jesus, the son of Mary, the prophet of Allah. So they were debarred and they were deposed from that position of golden mean, and Muslim Ummah was assigned to this. And the change of Qibla was an in fact indication, a sign that now they have officially been fired from that position, and Muslim Ummah has been assigned on this position of the golden mean, which has the responsibility of the spiritual leadership of all the world. How will they do this, perform this spiritual leadership? By being witness in the hereafter. And Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, our prophet, will be witness to us, and we will be witness to all the mankind. On the judgment day, it will be asked from us. First it will be asked from Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, what did you do for which we had sent you? And he will say and give witness, O Allah, I conveyed all the faith, all the sound thought, all the just things, whichever you told me by my words and by my deeds. And then we will stand up and give witness that whatever we receive from Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we conveyed to all the mankind by our words and by our deeds. So we will have to give this witness on the judgment day. Here I will stop and address especially Muslims, that are we really doing this, that we will be able to give this witness on the judgment day, on the final day? Not doing it. The reason I am delivering these lectures, the reason people who are trying to invite all the mankind towards Islam and the message of Allah are in fact trying to make themselves answerable for this witness. But we all are doing it? No. We have in fact lagged it in it miserably, and that is why Muslim Ummah is suffering so badly presently, that we are not giving this witness, we are not making ourselves responsible for this conveying of the message, as now there will be no prophet and no new books, and we have to convey the message of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the message of this book to all the mankind. And let me repeat it again, that is why I am here in front of you. In the very first program I told you that I am not here as a propagandist. I am not here as a salesman to sell his ideas. I am not doing it for my worldly benefits, but I am doing it for my judgment day, for my salvation in the hereafter. Now we take up the verse number 143 to understand the background of this verse. which we are discussing today, that is 177th of the same chapter 2. The 143 says, we had appointed the former Qibla, that is the Temple of Jerusalem, towards which you used to turn your face merely to test who would follow the messenger and who would turn back. It was indeed a hard test, but not for those who had been blessed with guidance from Allah. Now the third reason is given here, that this change of direction of Qibla or change of Qibla is not done just like that for nothing. But there are reasons behind it, so many reasons. Two we have already given to you. Now the third is there, that we first fixed that Qibla or Temple of Jerusalem to test people. And now if we have changed it, this is again to test people. And in the beginning, if you remember, I told you that all this life, everything is a test for us. It was a test in the beginning for those Quraysh or the people of Makkah or Arabs whose the Temple of Jerusalem did not belong to them. It belonged to the other nations of Jews and Christians. But if they were the slaves of Allah, obedient to Allah, they had not to object against it, and who were really believing in Allah, they turned their faces toward Temple of Jerusalem willingly, and they did not object to it. But those who were not the slaves of Allah, but the slaves of the prejudice and racialism and tradition, heresies, they in fact objected at that time too. And then when it was changed back to Kaaba, then it was the test for those Jews and Christians who had become Muslims. For the 14.5 years, they were turning their faces towards their own temple, towards their own Qibla, which was made by Solomon. So there was no problem. But now it was changed from there to Kaaba. Now it was a test for them, for those Jews and Christians who had become Muslims, that whether they are obedient and slaves of Allah or the slaves of the prejudice and the heresies and the traditions. So this way we have understood the background of this verse, that why it is said that the piety or the virtue is not that you turn your faces towards east or west. We will come to this later, naturally, as I told you in the translation when I gave you that what is real virtue. But now, having understood the background of this verse and its appearance at this stage of Islamic movement, we must imbibe the true spirit and essence behind this verse, that Allah does not like formal, superficial rituals of worship, but those which have the true spirit of obedience behind them, and that cannot be achieved unless we reflect and muse deeply in these injunctions. And that is why that in the treasures of the hadith or tradition, Islamic traditions, the first hadith or tradition which is recorded and which is most important is the one which means that the value or the reward of the deeds depend on the intentions behind it. So much so that when migration took place and the people who were persecuted in Makkah, and they were really persecuted so much that they couldn't perform their worship and worship Allah peacefully, then they migrated from Makkah to Medina. But one Muslim did not migrate. But later it happened that he came to know a woman in Medina whom he wanted to marry. So he proposed that I want to marry you. But the woman in Medina said, but I will not marry you unless you migrate to Medina. So for that purpose only, that he wanted to marry that woman, though earlier for the cause of Islam he did not migrate, he migrated to Medina to marry this woman. Then the companions of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to call this person as Mahajir Qais, that he migrated for Qais. And this is like this, that whatever intention you have behind your acts, no matter apparently how pious those acts appear, of course he migrated like everybody else migrated. Of course he left his house in Makkah. Of course he might have left his business in Makkah or his benefits in Makkah, but not for Islam, but to marry that woman. So he was called Mahajir Meqas. What a pity it is that we Muslims, I am especially addressing Muslims at this stage, don't pay heed and are absolutely unaware of this most vital issue. Muslims have been found indulging in the practices which have nothing to do with the Islamic teachings. And there are so many. I cannot go into the detail of those practices because people may get hurt. But you are learned people and you can understand what I am alluding to, what kind of practices I am referring to. I will just give you one example over here of the Salat or the 5-time prayers. Of course, 5-time prayers is a great virtue, maybe the greatest virtue of Islam. Of course it is. And we will just in fact come to this Salat because Allah describes here that virtue is Salat, offering the Salat. But what is virtuous in Salat? Muslims believe that virtuosity of Salat is this, that where we should tie our hands during Salat, either on chest or on the abdomen or leave them on the side. One who ties his hands on the chest feels that the people who are tying their hands on the abdomen are absolutely wrong and they are not in fact offering Salat. But that is not so. Allah has just told you that He is not so narrow-minded. He in fact sees the virtuosity of Salat in this, that you obediently come to Salat whenever you are called 5 times a day. And when you offer your Salat, you in fact remind yourself your position in the universe and you recall that what Allah is, who Allah is, and with whom and for whom you are worshipping. And to Him you will be answerable on the final day. These are the virtuosity of the Salat. And we will talk about the virtuosity of Salat further when we will go into this verse. But now, what I am telling you is this, that in formalities there is no virtuosity. But virtuosity is in the spirit behind that worship or any act of piety. Now, the thing is this, that all the people have been indulging in these practices. Jews, in fact, have been very experts in what is called the swelling the camels and straining the gnats, and it has been mentioned in the Bible. Whereas their own conduct was such that one of their own prophets has resembled their nation or the Israelites as a whore who did not even refrain from committing adultery on the first night of the wedding or of her wedding. And they have been denying many, many prophets which came in their line, and they have been in fact slaying them. As I just told you, that they claim that we killed Jesus, son of Mary, the prophet of Allah. But when it comes to criticizing Jesus, they say to Jesus, who in fact came to remind them of the Mosaic law, that, "Oh Jesus, why it is so that your disciples don't wash hands before eating food?" And Jesus replied to them, here I have a quote in front of me from Mark chapter 7, verse 6 to 13, that Jesus replied to them on this objection, "Well, hath Isaiah prophesied of you hypocrites?" That is, Jesus called his nation, these Jews, hypocrites. "As it is written, this people honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men, for laying aside the commandments of God. Ye hold the tradition of man as the washing of pots and cups, and many other such things ye do. And he said unto them, Full well ye reject the commandments of God, that ye may keep your tradition." So this was also the practice of Jews. And our Christian cousins, finally, last but not the least, have not left behind, and they in fact went far ahead. But their story can very briefly be told, as they actually deresonated the idea of deeds altogether, no matter the real virtues or non-real virtues. They didn't believe in performing deeds to get their salvage. Instead, they assume God on an idol who, in the opinion of its worshippers, why I said in the opinion of its worshippers? Because an idol cannot have its own opinion. So an idol, in the opinion of its worshippers, likes Balidan. And Balidan is an Indian word, and I have deliberately used it because idols are found in India. The meaning of Balidan means the sacrificial slaughter of a human being at its altar, or the altar of a deity. So Christians also thought this, and they very thoughtlessly went after a ritual for their salvage, a formal ritual for their salvage. They thought that Jesus was crucified on the cross, whereas Jesus was never crucified. He was only sentenced to be crucified. But he was raised by Allah without being put on the cross. And he was sentenced for the same reasons for which many prophets had been killed earlier in the history by their people. This is very interesting, that we must know. There is no difference that Jesus was sentenced for the crucifixion as happened with the other prophets. What happened with Yohanna? He was beheaded. And so it has been happening with many other prophets which have not been recorded in Quran but are mentioned in Bible. So there was nothing different as far as sentencing Jesus was concerned. So now, having understood all about what is not piety, what is not real virtue, you can say that I have taken so much time in explaining that what is not piety. Allah has taken this much time. Why? Because you cannot construct a new building without demolishing the old one on the place of the old one. If you want to construct the building of the sound and perfect and pure thought and faith, then you will have to demolish the building of the myth, of the tradition, of the heresies. So that is why I have taken this much time to tell you that what is not real virtue. Now Allah starts telling us that what real virtue is. And Allah says, the virtue is that one should sincerely believe in Allah and the last day and the angels and the book and the prophets. Sincerely is not the translation of the text. The word sincerely is not there in the text. But because of the context, because we are talking about the sincerity and the insincerity, what is regarded as the real virtue and what is the formality. So it has come here because of that. That we really talking about the sincere belief in Allah and the hereafter and prophets and the books and the angels. As far as the faith in the Allah, prophets, the angels and the books are concerned, they are interlinked. We cannot come to know about Allah if prophets do not tell us. So naturally, to believe in Allah, we have to believe in the prophets. And prophets, how do they tell us about Allah? By giving us books. So we have to believe and have faith in the books. And who brings these books to the prophets? The angels brings. So naturally we have to have faith in the angels and the true faith. What is true faith? One cannot really know that what is true faith except by watching the deeds of a person. Deeds and acts of a person show that how much faith he has. Allah himself tells in the Quran that what is the true faith. He says, a verse goes like this, that Allazina amanu ashaddu hubban lillah. The people who believe in Allah love him most. That is, they love Allah more than anything else or anybody else in the world. In another verse, Quran says, innamal mu'minuna allazina amanu billahi wa rasulihi summa lam yartabu wa jahadu bi amwalihim wa anfusihim fi sabilillah. The believers are those, the true believers are those who believe in Allah and His Prophet and then don't fall in doubt. And since they don't fall in doubt and pure in their thought, they sacrifice, they strive in the way of Allah by their wealth and by their self, by their life. So, how it is known that one sincerely believes, that one becomes ready to sacrifice his wealth and life in his way. This is real piety. This is real virtue. The first thing which has been said here about real virtue is this, that one should have faith. This also gives us the importance of faith. Faith is that platform on which the building of the deeds is constructed. Now we come to the next virtue. What is real virtue? And out of his love, and out of his love, whose love? Allah's love, is spent of one's choice wealth for relatives and orphans, for the needy and the wayfarer, for the beggars and for the ransom of slaves. When we were talking about in one of our previous lectures, when we were talking about the prerequisites of benefiting from Quran, you must remember, you may be remembering that we told you that there again, one of the prerequisites out of two deeds mentioned over there, one was salat, the other was that one should be ready to spend in way of Allah. Here again it is said. There it was said that it is ready to benefit from the guidance of Quran, that one must spend in ways of Allah. Here it has been described as the real virtue. Of course, they are same thing, one and the same thing, to say it like that or like this. So it is one of the real virtues that one should spend. Naturally, as we told you at that time, that Allah regards those people and makes them near to himself who are ready to spend in his way. Now here you can see that Allah has given very much detail about this, that they spend of one's choice wealth, that is better part of their wealth, better part of the produce of the earth, because when this Quran was revealed, people used to spend in ways of Allah part of their crops which they used to harbor. So it is said that the better part of their wealth, the choice wealth, for relatives. The first one, the first category on which one should spend is the relative. As the Bible also says, the charity begins at home, that one must start from the relatives. One must hold himself responsible for his own relatives. Then for the orphans, so much importance has been given to orphans, that one should spend on orphans and look after them because their own parents are not there. Then it is said for the needy, spend on the needy. Now, if we just mention this one word, needy, just this morning I was reading an article in the Reader's Digest about the poverty and the consumerism, the comparison between poverty and consumerism. And it was written over there that more than 4 billion people of this world are suffering from poverty. So they are needy. So many people are needy. We must spend on them. And the wayfarer, because the wayfarer is away from his home. He doesn't have the resources with him. So you must spend on him. That is why when Islam was prevailing and it was dominant in the world, and there were many, many Muslim states in the world, real states, real powerful states, they used to make free boarding lodges for the wayfarers and for the beggars, those who ask for you, and for the ransom of slaves. Now notice this, the people say object to Islam that it promotes slavery. It does not promote slavery. It condemns slavery and it frees slavery by cajoling and tempting people. It did not order at once to finish slavery because the economy of that time was based on the slavery, because there were thousands and thousands of slaves on which the economy and the business system and the work system was depending. So it could not be finished at once. But Allah has tempted people, cajoled, pursued people to free them, that you should spend on the ransom of slaves. And the history has recorded those people, those Muslims who have really freed thousands of slaves by paying their ransom. In fact, this monetary system, this financial system of Islam is so important, is so beautiful, that if this world only adopts this system, there can be a total peace in there. We can see in the Quran that Quran doesn't tell us, it doesn't mention that if a person will not offer his salat, he will go to hell directly. Or if a person will not observe fasting, he will go to hell. But it does say that if one will change the laws of heirship given in Quran, he will go to hell. One who consumes others' wealth unlawfully by bribery or by thuggery or by any other means, he will go to hell. Or the people who expropriate the wealth of orphans, they eat fire, it is said in Quran. So we see that so much importance has been given to these financial affairs. And when it comes to expiation, the crime we commit against Allah by taking the wrong oath in His name, then we have to pay the expiation or atonement for that. And what Allah asks us to do, feed 20 destitute or misers. That again goes to our own brothers, other human beings. So it is such a beautiful system, this financial and monetary system of Islam, that is why I have been calling Islam the panacea for the mankind, that it can really solve these problems. If we really practice these financial practices, the way we have been persuaded to do this, do you believe that there can remain any animosity, any enmity, any prejudice, any hate between people? No, they will become one and united society. Then the next virtue is an established salat. For salat, briefly I can only say the Quran itself says, "Inna salata tanha anil fahshai wal munkar," that prayer stops a person from indecent and evil acts. When Quran itself is saying that what can be piety, what can be more important for attaining piety or become pious or be virtuous than salat. That is true. In fact, I talked in some detail in one of my previous lectures that nothing can be better than salat to apply the brakes on a person's whims and wishes and his tendency to go after the Satan. So, salat or 5-time prayers itself is the real virtue. As I told you, that tying your hands on the chest or abdomen is not real virtue, but salat itself is the real virtue. And pay the zakat. I have been telling you before also that zakat is the obligatory 2.5% tax which a Muslim has to pay to remain in the circle of Islam. Those things which were just talking about, that they will spend in the way of Allah to the relatives and to the needy and to the wayfarer, that was about the alms, general alms or sadaqat or charity. This is about zakat. We must differentiate between zakat, which is obligatory, and between sadaqat, which we have been persuaded to do. Muslims have been mixing it up. Whenever it has, many chances have come in my life when I have been talking to people and asking them to spend in way of Allah, they always say, we have paid the zakat. Of course you have paid the zakat, but you are also asked to pay the alms, to sadaqat and charity. So this is also the real piety. And the virtuous are those who keep their pledges when they make them and show fortitude in hardships and adversity. First, they keep their pledges. How do they keep their pledges? I will give you just one example, that when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did that pact of Hudaybiyah with the Quraysh of Makkah in the 6th year after Hijrah, and pact was not yet signed, but it was just agreed upon, the conditions were agreed upon. And one of the conditions was this, that if anyone escapes from Makkah, who was being persecuted over there because of the Muslims, if anyone escapes from Makkah and comes to Medina, he will be returned to Makkah. But if anyone escapes from Medina and goes to Makkah, he will not be returned. Now, it was such an awkward condition apparently. I cannot go into much detail of that. But when it was being agreed upon and the pact was yet to be signed, Abu Jandal, one of the companions of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was in Makkah and he was being persecuted by his masters. He escaped from Makkah and came to that place where the pact was going to be signed. And he asked Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, please save me and take me to Medina. And he was really injured by that violence which he was facing in Makkah. But when it was said, the leader of the Quraysh said that no, you have already agreed upon this. The people, the Muslims said that it has not yet been signed. But Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, okay, so what if it is not yet signed? We have agreed upon this condition. So this was the way these people kept their pledges. Pledges are of many kinds. In fact, we should talk in much detail about pledges. But I can only say this in this lecture, that there are many kinds of pledges. Some are written, some are verbal, some are neither. Some pledges are there, just there, without reading them without writing them, without saying them, as a pledge between a man and wife, as a pledge between children and parents, as a pledge between a friend, and a pledge between brother and brother, and a pledge between one human being with the other human being. Whenever he is born on the earth, he is bound to a pledge of humanity that he will not bring any harm to his fellow human beings. So that is all I can say about pledges. Now we go to the next virtue, that they show fortitude, they show patience. They just don't get away in the case of hardship and adversity from the right path, but they remain steadfast on the right path and face all the adversities and difficulties which come in their way, as the people in Makkah for 13 years faced that persecution and difficulties, and finally when it became impossible to continue with and practice their religion, they had to migrate. So they migrated, they left their houses. They did not leave Islam, but they left their houses. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to say that I love Makkah so much, but he never went back to Makkah after he migrated. That is the love of Islam, that is the patience, that is the fortitude, which is the real virtue. And in the struggle between the truth and falsehood, of course, whenever a person tries to become pious or righteous or virtuous, if you remember from one of my previous lectures again, that from the first day, Satan has been pronounced as our avowed enemy. He is always inviting us towards his path. So there is always a going on, a constant struggle between the satanic forces and the godly forces. So this struggle always going on. It's always going on. It is going on now, presently, everywhere. The Muslim must realize this thing, that they have to face and they have to pass this struggle and remain patient and show fortitude in such fight of the right and the wrong. So they show fortitude. Such are the truthful people and such are the pious. This is the last portion of this verse, that after telling these points of virtue, real virtues, Allah announces in the end that such are the pious people, such are the truthful. So what is truth, what is piety, what is virtuosity, we have very clearly told you, and in much more detail we have also told you that what is not virtue and should not be regarded as virtue. May Allah has given me the strength to convey the feelings, convey the teachings of Allah to you, and He may accept my efforts, and let's all pray that we must understand these things and come towards following the Quran, which is the purpose of these lectures and which is also the title of series of these lectures. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum.